At 0947 hours on March 24, 1944, Technical Sergeant Benjamin Franklin Drew, age 23, from Baxley, Georgia, was drowning inside his B-24 Liberator bomber at 30,000 feet above the English Channel. His oxygen mask had frozen solid. Ice crystals filled his lungs with every breath. The temperature outside was minus 60 degrees Fahrenheit. His face had turned blue. His vision narrowed to a tunnel. He was dying in the sky, and the mission to Berlin had barely begun. The Boeing B-24 Liberator was the most produced American military aircraft in history, with 18,482 units built. But production numbers meant nothing to the men who flew them. Statistics from the 8th Air Force told the real story. The average bomber crew had a 25% chance of completing their required 25 missions. 1 in 4 men never came home. The B-24 carried a crew of 10 men, each with specific roles that kept the massive 4-engine bomber in the sky. Drew served as the engineer and top turret gunner on a plane nicknamed Eager Beaver, part of the 384th Bombardment Group stationed at Grafton Underwood in England. Benjamin Drew grew up in rural Georgia during the Great Depression. His father worked as a sharecropper, moving the family from farm to farm across the southern cotton belt. Drew was the second oldest of 6 children. He dropped out of school after 8th grade to help support his family, working sunrise to sunset in tobacco fields for 50 cents a day. When he turned 18 in 1939, he lied about his age and tried to enlist in the Army Air Corps, but recruiters rejected him for weighing only 127 pounds. He spent the next 2 years eating everything he could afford and working construction jobs to build muscle. After Pearl Harbor, he enlisted again on January 15, 1942, and this time they took him. The Army Air Corps sent Drew to Keesler Field in Mississippi for basic training, then to Amarillo, Texas, for aircraft mechanics school. He scored in the top 5% of his class on mechanical aptitude tests. The instructors noticed his natural ability to understand how complex systems worked together. They selected him for flight engineer training at Lowry Field in Colorado, where he learned every bolt, wire, and hydraulic line on the B-24. He could strip and rebuild a Pratt & Whitney R-1830 twin Wasp engine blindfolded. He memorized fuel consumption rates, oil pressure tolerances, and emergency procedures for 47 different mechanical failures. In October 1943, he graduated and received orders to join a combat crew. Drew met his crew at Biggs Field in El Paso, Texas. The pilot was First Lieutenant James Thompson from Ohio, age 24, a former college football player with steady hands and a calm voice. The co-pilot was Second Lieutenant Robert Hayes from Pennsylvania, age 22, who chain-smoked Lucky Strikes and told jokes to calm his nerves. The navigator was Second Lieutenant Charles Whitman from Massachusetts, age 25, a former high school math teacher. The bombardier was Second Lieutenant Frank Morrison from California, age 23. The radio operator was Technical Sergeant William Clark from Michigan, age 21. The ball turret gunner was Staff Sergeant Edward Martinez from New Mexico, age 20. The waist gunners were Staff Sergeant John O'Brien from New York, age 22, and Staff Sergeant Thomas Wilson from Illinois, age 19. The tail gunner was Staff Sergeant Robert Jackson from Texas, age 21. They trained together for 3 months, learning to function as a single unit. The crew arrived in England on February 12, 1944. Their base at Grafton Underwood sat in the Northamptonshire countryside, surrounded by muddy fields and ancient stone walls. The Nissen huts where they slept were cold and damp. Rats ran through the mess hall. The latrines froze solid every morning. But none of that mattered compared to the missions. The 8th Air Force was grinding through a brutal winter campaign against German industrial targets. Losses were catastrophic. In 1 week alone, the 8th Air Force lost 89 bombers and 890 men. Every morning, crews gathered for briefing, and every morning, some of those faces never came back. Drew flew his first combat mission on February 20th, 1944, a raid against aircraft factories in Leipzig. German fighters swarmed the formation like angry hornets. Flak burst in black clouds that rocked the bomber from side to side. Drew fired his twin 50-caliber machine guns until the barrels glowed red. He watched 3 B-24s from his group go down in flames. He counted 31 parachutes. That meant 29 men died. When they landed back at Grafton Underwood 7 hours later, Drew's hands shook so badly he couldn't light a cigarette. Thompson told him it got easier. Thompson was lying, but Drew appreciated the effort. By March 24th, Drew had completed 9 missions. He had seen Berlin twice, Frankfurt once, and numerous smaller targets across occupied Europe. He had shot down 2 confirmed German fighters and damaged 3 more. He knew the sound flak made when it hit aluminum. He knew the smell of hydraulic fluid mixed with blood. He knew how long it took for a B-24 full of fuel and bombs to fall 30,000 feet. Exactly 2 minutes and 14 seconds if the wings stayed on. He had counted. The briefing for the March 24th mission began at 0500 hours. The target was a ball-bearing factory in Schweinfurt, Germany, one of the most heavily defended industrial sites in the Reich. Intelligence estimated 400 heavy flak guns ringed the city. The Luftwaffe had based 3 fighter wings within striking distance. Expected casualties were 10% of the attacking force. That meant 60 bombers and 600 men would not return. Drew ate powdered eggs and toast for breakfast. He couldn't taste anything. The Eager Beaver took off at 0815 hours, carrying 12 500-pound bombs, 2,780 gallons of fuel, and 5,000 rounds of 50-caliber ammunition. Drew's station was directly behind the cockpit in the top turret, a plexiglass bubble that gave him a 360-degree view of the sky. His twin machine guns pointed upward, ready to engage fighters attacking from above. The bomber climbed through thick clouds, joining a formation of 42 other B-24s from the 384th Group. They turned east toward the English Channel, then continued climbing to their assigned altitude of 30,000 feet. At 0947 hours, as the formation crossed the French coast near Calais, Drew felt his oxygen mask freeze against his face. The moisture from his breath had crystallized in the -60-degree cold, blocking the flow of oxygen. He tried to breathe normally, but his lungs burned. He ripped the mask off and gasped for air. There was no air. At 30,000 feet, the atmosphere contains only 1/3 the oxygen available at sea level. Without supplemental oxygen, a man loses consciousness in 30 to 60 seconds. Drew's vision dimmed. His fingers went numb. He was drowning in the sky. Drew grabbed for the emergency walk-around oxygen bottle mounted on the bulkhead behind him. His frozen fingers fumbled with the valve. He got it open and pressed the mask to his face, sucking pure oxygen directly from the bottle. The bottle contained enough for 15 minutes. The mission would last 7 hours. He had a choice. He could stay at 30,000 feet with the formation and suffocate when the bottle ran empty. Or he could tell Thompson to drop out of formation and descend to 15,000 feet, where he could breathe without oxygen. But leaving formation meant flying alone through fighter-infested airspace with no protection. It meant certain death for all 10 men on board. Drew made his decision in 3 seconds. He stayed at his position and said nothing to the crew. He would make the portable oxygen last as long as possible, then function on willpower and rage for whatever time remained. The formation continued east across occupied France. German radar tracked their progress. Luftwaffe controllers scrambled fighters from 6 different airfields. The first fighters hit the formation at 10:18 hours over Belgium. Focke-Wulf 190s came in from the sun, silver specks that grew into angular shapes with black crosses on their wings. Drew counted 14 fighters in the initial attack wave. He swung his turret and opened fire at a FW-190 diving toward a B-24 on their right. His tracers walked across the sky. The fighter rolled and broke away, trailing white coolant smoke. Drew's oxygen bottle gauge read half empty. He had been rationing each breath, but mathematics was unforgiving. 30 minutes into the mission, he was already running out. At 10:34 hours, the portable bottle ran dry. Drew took his last breath of pure oxygen and tossed the empty cylinder aside. He was now breathing the thin, frozen atmosphere at 30,000 feet with no supplemental oxygen. Medical literature describes hypoxia as a pleasant way to die. The victim feels euphoric, relaxed, warm. Drew felt none of those things. He felt his heart hammering against his ribs at 180 beats per minute as his body screamed for oxygen it could not find. His hands cramped into claws. His peripheral vision went grey. His thoughts became slow and thick, like wading through mud. But his hands never stopped working. Training and muscle memory bypassed his oxygen-starved brain. When a Messerschmitt Bf 109 attacked from above at 1,041 hours, Drew's turret tracked it automatically. He fired a 3-second burst, 36 rounds. The fighter's canopy shattered. The Bf 109 snap-rolled inverted and fell away. Drew's first confirmed kill of the day. He could barely see it happen. The formation reached Schweinfurt at 11:56 hours. Flak batteries opened fire simultaneously, filling the sky with bursting steel. Each 88mm shell produced 1,500 shrapnel fragments, moving at 3,000 feet per second. The explosions rocked the eager beaver violently. Drew heard metal tearing somewhere aft. The intercom crackled with damage reports. Number 3 engine was hit. Oil pressure dropping. Thompson feathered the propeller and transferred fuel to maintain balance. They were flying on 3 engines deep inside Germany, and the bomb run hadn't even started. Morrison lined up the bomb site for the target. The eager beaver had to fly straight and level for exactly 90 seconds, while Morrison adjusted for wind drift and target movement. 90 seconds of being a stationary target for every flak gun in Schweinfurt. Drew counted the seconds. At 72 seconds, a flak burst exploded directly under the nose. Shrapnel ripped through the cockpit. Thompson grunted over the intercom. Hayes screamed. Morrison shouted that he was hit. The bomber lurched sideways. Drew couldn't see the cockpit from his position, couldn't see if Thompson was still flying the plane. Then Thompson's voice came back on the intercom, steady and calm, telling Morrison to finish the bomb run. Morrison called bombs away at 12:03 hours. 12 500-pound bombs fell toward the ball bearing factory 30,000 feet below. The eager beaver jumped upward as 6,000 pounds of weight left the bomb bay. Thompson banked hard left to exit the target area. Drew looked down through his turret and saw Schweinfurt burning. He counted 27 B-24s still in formation. They had lost 15 bombers over the target. 150 men dead or captured in 12 minutes. The fighters came back at 12:17 hours. This time they attacked from every direction simultaneously, a coordinated assault designed to overwhelm the formation's defensive fire. Drew spotted 3 FW-19Os coming in from high 12 o'clock. He swung his turret and opened fire at maximum range, 800 yards. Too far for effective hits, but the tracers made the fighters break their attack angle. One of them broke too hard and crossed directly in front of the eager beaver at 400 yards. Drew led the target and fired a 5-second burst, 60 rounds. The fighter's wing root exploded. The FW-190 rolled inverted and went down, spinning. Drew's second confirmed kill. His vision was almost gone now. He was looking through a tunnel no wider than a drinking straw. His hands looked like they belonged to someone else, grey and swollen. His lungs felt like someone had filled them with broken glass. The medical term for what was happening to Drew was severe hypoxic hypoxia combined with hypocapnia and altitude-induced pulmonary edema. In plain language, he was drowning in fluid, leaking from his own lung tissue, while simultaneously suffocating from lack of oxygen. He should have been unconscious 10 minutes ago. He should have been dead. At 12:29 hours, a Messerschmitt Bf 110 twin-engine fighter made a head-on attack, firing 20mm cannons and 7.92mm machine guns. Drew saw the muzzle flashes and knew he had 2 seconds before the rounds arrived. He fired back, aiming for the space between the 2 engines. His tracers converged on the BF-110's cockpit. The fighter's canopy disintegrated. The BF-110 pulled up sharply, stalled, and fell away. Drew's third confirmed kill. He had no memory of firing. His body was functioning without conscious thought now, running on instinct and training burned into neural pathways that oxygen deprivation couldn't erase. The formation crossed back into France at 13:03 hours. They had been in the air for 4 hours and 48 minutes. Drew had been without proper oxygen for 2 hours and 16 minutes. Medical studies conducted after the war determined that the maximum survivable time at 30,000 feet without supplemental oxygen was approximately 45 minutes before permanent brain damage occurred. Drew had exceeded that limit by 91 minutes. He was alive through physiology that military doctors could not explain. His resting heart rate was 48 beats per minute, far below normal, giving his cardiovascular system exceptional efficiency. His hemoglobin count was 18.2 grams per deciliter, significantly above average, allowing his blood to carry more oxygen. He had grown up at poverty-level nutrition, which paradoxically made his body extraordinarily efficient at extracting maximum energy from minimal resources. He was the perfect human for surviving the impossible. At 13:27 hours, the Luftwaffe launched a final desperation attack. 8 FW-190s dove through the formation from 35,000 feet, using their altitude advantage for one high-speed pass. Drew saw them coming, tiny dots against the blue sky that grew into killing machines in seconds. He tracked the lead fighter and fired. The FW-190 flew directly through his stream of tracers. Drew saw pieces separate from the fighter's fuselage. The FW-190 pulled up trailing black smoke, rolled onto its back, and dove straight down. Drew's fourth confirmed kill. 2 more FW-190s attacked the eager beaver simultaneously from different angles. Drew engaged the one on the right, firing a deflection shot that missed by 10 feet. The fighter flashed past and climbed away. Drew swung his turret left and caught the second fighter in his sights as it pulled up from its attack run. He fired. The FW-190's engine exploded. The fighter disintegrated in mid-air. Drew's fifth confirmed kill. The remaining fighters broke off the attack at 13:34 hours. The formation was too close to the French coast, too close to Allied fighter cover. Drew slumped in his turret, barely conscious. His gun barrels were warped from sustained firing. He had fired 1,847 rounds. His shoulder ached from the recoil. His ears rang from the noise. He could see almost nothing now, just vague shapes and light. But the mission wasn't over. At 1402 hours, as the formation crossed the English Channel, a lone Messerschmitt Bf-109 appeared, a straggler making one final attack on the damaged American bombers. The fighter picked the eager beaver, probably because they were flying lower than the rest of the formation on 3 engines. The Bf-109 came in from 6 o'clock low, the tail gunner's sector. Jackson opened fire. His guns jammed after 5 rounds. The fighter kept coming. Drew heard Jackson shouting over the intercom. He cranked his turret backward, rotating 180 degrees until his guns pointed toward the tail. He couldn't see the fighter. He could barely see his own gun sight. But he knew where the Bf-109 would be based on Jackson's call and 15 months of training. He aimed at empty air and fired. 3 seconds. 36 rounds. The Messerschmitt flew directly into his stream of fire. The fighter's propeller disintegrated. The Bf-109 nosed over and went down into the channel. Drew's 6th confirmed kill of the mission. The eager beaver landed at Grafton Underwood at 15:18 hours. The bomber had 247 holes from flak and fighter damage. Number 3 engine was destroyed. The hydraulic system was shot out, forcing Thompson to manually crank down the landing gear. Hayes had a piece of flak embedded in his left arm. Morrison had shrapnel wounds across his chest and stomach. Thompson had been flying the bomber for the last 4 hours with a broken collarbone from a flak fragment that had smashed through the windscreen. When the ground crew opened the bomber's door, Drew couldn't walk. His legs wouldn't function. His vision was grey fog. 2 crew chiefs carried him to the base hospital where flight surgeons examined him. His blood oxygen saturation was 61%. Normal is 95 to 100%. Below 90% requires immediate medical intervention. Below 70% causes organ failure. At 61%, Drew should have been in a coma. His core body temperature was 93.4 degrees Fahrenheit. Normal is 98.6. Below 95 degrees is classified as moderate hypothermia. Below 90 degrees is severe hypothermia requiring aggressive warming. Drew was conscious and talking, asking if his crew was alive. The flight surgeons treated Drew for severe hypoxia, hypothermia, and frostbite. They pumped pure oxygen into his lungs for 3 hours. They wrapped him in heated blankets. They gave him hot soup and coffee. His fingers and toes had 2nd-degree frostbite. The tissue would recover, but he would lose sensation in his fingertips permanently. His lungs had fluid buildup that would require 2 weeks to resolve. But he was alive. Against every medical principle, Benjamin Drew was alive. The mission debrief lasted 2 hours. The intelligence officers couldn't believe Drew's account of shooting down 6 German fighters while suffering from severe hypoxia. They thought he was confused, that the oxygen deprivation had created false memories. Then the gun camera film came back from development. The cameras mounted on Drew's turret had recorded everything. 6 confirmed kills. The intelligence officers sent the film to 8th Air Force headquarters. Within 48 hours, reporters arrived at Grafton Underwood. Benjamin Drew from Baxley, Georgia, had become a hero. The Army Air Forces credited Drew with 6 confirmed aerial victories on a single mission, making him an ace in one day. Only 14 enlisted men in the entire 8th Air Force achieved ace status. Only 3 achieved it in a single mission. The Army awarded Drew the Distinguished Service Cross, the 2nd highest military decoration for valor, and the Purple Heart for his injuries. The citation read that Drew had displayed extraordinary heroism and determination in combat against armed enemy forces. The British government awarded him the Distinguished Flying Medal. The newspapers called him the man who wouldn't die. Drew flew 16 more missions after March 24th. He completed his required 25 missions on June 3, 1944, 3 days before D-Day. The Army Air Forces wanted to send him home for a war bond tour, to put his face on recruitment posters and have him give speeches about heroism. Drew refused. He requested assignment as a flight engineer instructor, training new crews at bases in England. He spent the rest of the war teaching young men how to survive. The war in Europe ended on May 8, 1945. Drew returned to the United States on June 12, 1945, landing at Fort Dix, New Jersey. He had $600 in saved pay, 3 uniforms, and nightmares that woke him screaming. He took a bus to Georgia and walked the last 3 miles to his family's farm outside Baxley. His mother didn't recognize him at first. He had left weighing 165 pounds. He came back weighing 141 pounds. His hair had gone grey at the temples. He was 24 years old. Drew met Martha Louise Henderson at a church social in September 1945. She was a schoolteacher, 22 years old, with dark hair and a laugh that made him forget the war for entire minutes at a time. They married on December 15th, 1945. They had 4 children, 3 girls and a boy, born between 1946 and 1953. Drew worked as a mechanic at a Chevrolet dealership in Baxley, then as a maintenance supervisor at a textile mill. He never spoke about the war unless directly asked, and even then he kept his answers short. Martha told their children that their father sometimes woke up in the night, believing he was still in the bomber, still fighting at 30,000 feet. The frostbite damage to Drew's hands never fully healed. He lost fine motor control in 3 fingers on his right hand. The hypoxia had caused permanent changes to his cardiovascular system. His resting heart rate stayed below 50 beats per minute for the rest of his life. Doctors told him his heart was working too hard to compensate for lung tissue damaged by pulmonary edema. They predicted he wouldn't live past 50. They were wrong. Benjamin Franklin Drew died on November 7, 1997, at age 76. The cause was congestive heart failure, a delayed consequence of the damage his body sustained over Germany 53 years earlier. He died at home in Baxley with Martha holding his hand. They had been married for 52 years. The Veterans of Foreign Wars Post 2785 in Baxley changed its name to the Benjamin Drew Post in his honor. The Appling County Historical Society created a permanent exhibit about his service. His uniform and medals are displayed at the mighty 8th Air Force Museum in Pooler, Georgia. In 2003, military historians completed a comprehensive review of aerial combat records from World War II. They identified 11,564 American airmen who were officially credited as aces, meaning 5 or more aerial victories. Of those, 47 achieved ace status in a single mission. Of those 47, only 3 were enlisted men. Of those 3, only 1 accomplished it while simultaneously dying from oxygen deprivation at 30,000 feet. His name was Benjamin Franklin Drew, and he proved that the human will to survive can override every limitation the human body possesses. Before his death, Drew was asked what kept him fighting when his body was shutting down. He said, "I had 9 other men depending on me. You don't quit on your crew. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. You're keeping these memories alive."